Hi there, I'm Stephen Diamond, and today in this class, I wanted to talk to you about why you are afraid to try new things in your life. You know, that's something that a lot of us don't really think about on the regular basis, and it all begins with an unpleasant feeling that ultimately becomes paralyzing fear. And then you do absolutely nothing. You take no action whatsoever, which means that your life stays exactly the same. Those unpleasant feelings are part of our daily lives. They are there to teach us very specific lessons. Once we've learned our lesson, they often move on, but might come back with another lesson later. And this is what causes the stress and struggle in our lives. As a result of these experiences, you're likely to feel sad and stressed and depressed and maybe even alone. You know, these are all perfectly normal emotions to go through from time to time. We all experiencing them, including myself. I've experienced all of those emotions. You know, everyone feels low and apprehensive about something or the other at some point in their lives. And I find that a lot of people, when these unpleasant emotions begin to consume them, then they must act before it's too late. And I'm going to explain to you how to understand when it's too late. This checklist that we're going to run through will give you simple tips and techniques to help manage and even overcome your anxiety. And that is so important. It's why we're here. So let's talk about you and your anxiety. And I want to talk about how to overcome your stuck points. That's something that a lot of us never think about. We all know what the feeling of being stuck is like. But have you ever thought about what is sticking you? So anxiety can creep up on you in many ways, from physical and behavioral symptoms that are obvious to more subtler symptoms that mess with your emotional and cognitive state of being. Yet each time it can leave behind a somewhat similar and familiar feeling, and that's the feeling of being a little more lost, battered, and just a little bit more alone than you were before. Now, let's look into the personality concepts that will help you to understand how your anxiety actually works. You might not realize it, but you are a multifaceted human being, and you are a very complex being on top of that. So you need to really understand how anxiety works in order to learn how to overcome it. That's going to be the hard part in your current state of mind, because I bet as you are sitting right there listening to me right now, you're thinking that you know exactly how anxiety works. But I assure you that you do not. We all think, because we live and walk around every day in this meat suit, that we know it, we understand it, and we know how it thinks and feels. But if that was true, you wouldn't be right here, right now, listening to me. You need to understand the many dimensions within which you and your anxiety actually exists. It's very important to start right there, because once you start identifying these dimensions, which are mostly characterized by triggers and symptoms, you'll be able to work around them and in time overcome them. And that is how you create change. Understanding your anxiety and what it is doing to you is also very vitally important for your well-being. Anxiety on the inside can affect what you do and how you act on the outside. And when those two are not in alignment, that's when chaos is created in your life. And so if you were to observe your mind and body carefully, you might be able to notice some signs, behavioral and physical, that can tell you what your anxiety might be doing to you. For instance, an anxious person might be dealing with several conflicting and apprehensive thoughts at the same time. This was a big issue in my life. The internal noise and fear that reverberates inside might make them appear tried, withdrawn, and even nervous at times. Next, I want to show you how to reflect upon your triggers. And by identifying those beliefs, you'll learn what is standing in your way of moving forward and making the changes in your life that you want. If you could follow an anxious mind, if you could examine your anxious mind, you might see patterns of unfavorable thoughts that keep playing on and off over and over again in your mind. Sound familiar? Now, these thoughts might be triggers to the anxiety itself, and so addressing them is very important. A powerful technique I teach in my course at lifeskillsmasterclass.com is called Imagery Exposure. Now, sometimes it's used in therapy, and that's where I first learned it. And it can help address the triggers as well as allow you to identify their sources. Now, let me tell you why this is so vitally important. The reason is it's a gradual process, and the first step to addressing your anxiety really is learning what your belief system truly is. Now, here again, we all think we know what our belief system is, but I promise you, you don't. You think you do, but you don't. Once you know what is causing your anxiety, you can, in time, find ways to manage and even overcome it. You know, over the past 20 years of coaching people, I have learned the important lessons of what works, but more importantly, I've learned what doesn't work. That is the difference. One of the very first steps is to learn how to mindfully move beyond the beliefs that are blocking your path to success. And to be able to solve problems, you must think realistically, coherently, and do so without any mind chatter. And that is where most people really drop the ball. It's that internal dialogue. And unfortunately, when anxious, our minds can get tied up in its contemplation wheel and fail to work on more productive and purposeful things. And so you end up doing nothing. This is why you never get things done, and making important decisions are really difficult for you. So once you learn how to process information the correct way, you'll begin making better decisions in your life, and you will find that your life begins to change for the better as a result. However, what I find with most people is that you can only move forward if you learn how to remove the fear in your life, which means learning how to face your internal demons. You probably experience anxiety in one form or the other, but don't know where those feelings are actually coming from. This is completely normal and is a sign that you are ready to understand the origins of your anxiety and ready to work your way around and eventually overcome it. Let's learn how to address your mental and physical battles while digging deeper into the source of your anxiety, which I like to call your inner demons, so to speak. If you've ever seen the TV show Dexter, which was about a serial killer, he used to call that dark part of himself his dark passenger. And that's kind of how anxiety is. It lives in the back of your head, and it's kind of like a demon. Learning how to put events and emotions and vibrations together is key in understanding how anxiety is actually holding you back. The confusion and anxiety that you feel today could be the result of seeds that were planted in your past, like those of childhood trauma, for example. I myself am a victim of lots of childhood trauma. I was sexually abused, and when I was 8 years old, I found my babysitter dead, hacked into pieces. I was just 8 years old, and that was my first experience with anxiety and stress. I was 8. And so digging into your past, into those deep memories that you perhaps would otherwise like to avoid, and learn the real world skills to deal with your past demons rather than trying to forget them or have them consciously erased from your mind altogether, can help piece together the source of your anxiety. And that is the real secret, because it's like getting a roadmap for how to solve your problems. Wouldn't you like to have a document like that would tell you exactly where to go? A GPS system? That's what my course is all about. It's a blueprint, if you will, that will show you exactly how to rebuild your life in the proper way. You know, we can start by imagining the worst things that you could possibly think of. Now you might ask, why would you want to do that? Life can be rough sometimes, and bad things can happen without a plan, and then can leave behind a sense of lasting pain and fear. And it's that lasting pain and fear that paralyzes us and completely stops us from doing anything. But sometimes our minds can fantasize about things that never happened and probably never ever will. In fact, you've heard me say this on television many times, but most people fail to realize that 97% of what they fear and worry about on a daily basis never happens. Ever. Don't believe me? Well, I have a way to show you just how true this really is. And when you accept it in your mind and your heart fully, it will change your life. Keep a worry journal on the notepad on your phone for just 1 week. Here's how you do it. Every time that you catch yourself worrying about something, just take your phone and write it down. At the end of the week, I want you to total up how many of these fears and worries actually happened. You're going to be surprised, because the truth is, the root cause of all of your anxiety comes down to how you process information. You are the cause of all of your stress and anxiety. Sometimes that's hard for us to accept. These things can be our biggest fears and cause us to really suffer in our lives. I see it every single day with the people inside my course. We constantly imagine these catastrophic events and jump to the worst possible conclusions with no reason or logic whatsoever. And that's no way to live. But by doing this repeatedly, you are living that experience many times over and over, because your mind and body might not be able to differentiate real from the imaginary world in your head. And that can lead you to self-blame and self-loathing. And eventually that's going to lead you to hating or disliking yourself. And all of that leads to paralyzation and inaction. Years ago, I had a coaching client, and I'm going to call her Rachel. And she suffered needlessly for decades. She suffered from constant worry and anxiety and stress and depression and feeling alone. She worked for a major magazine in New York City and was a high-paid executive. And she says that that job was the result of her busy life, or the anxiety rather, was the result of her busy life and all the stress that came with her job. But I showed her how that wasn't true. It really was about how she processed information. She would tell me, for example, that she wakes up at 5 a.m. every day, she travels an hour to reach work, and is constantly rushing through meetings and deadlines and all kinds of things like that. And then it takes another hour to reach home by usually around 8 p.m. or so. But then she has all of her nighttime chores. She has to cook her dinner, she has to take care of the kids, and then she finishes her dinner, and then she has to prepare for the next day before she can finally go to bed at 11 p.m. And then she can't wind down and relax, and her mind is racing, thinking about work and tomorrow and the kids and all of that, and she can't let go or go to sleep. Sometimes things get rough for her, and her anxiety kicks in on top of all of that as a result of the way that she processes information in her head. And here's how she says her mind plays out events when that happens. This is kind of a representation of her internal dialogue. Some of this might sound familiar to you, so listen very carefully. She'll begin with a negative internal dialogue that convinces her that she is worthless, and she begins to blame and hates herself as a result. And her negative internal dialogue sounds something like this. She'll start with a stimulus or a trigger, and then she goes, "Oh, my throat hurts. I think I can feel a bump in my throat. What if it's cancer? What am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? Am I going to die? What will happen with my family once I'm gone?" I mean, can you see how she's building all of this up? But she goes deeper. She starts thinking about, will my family miss me when I'm gone? You see how it's getting bigger and bigger? She would then begin to ruminate in her head, reliving this scenario over and over again. And then she would remember a bad or traumatic experience and replay that event repeatedly over and over in her head, imagining it happening again and again. And sometimes she would imagine it being worse than it was the first time. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so her body and her mind began to react. And the reason for this is that your mind and your body doesn't know the difference between something that you are imagining and something that is real. If the mind perceives it as a threat, then your body will physically respond. And that is when you have a panic attack. So she would see a group of people, for example, giggling in front of her, and that would suddenly lead to thoughts, I like to say, going down the rabbit hole. And that rabbit hole would sound like, are they laughing at me? Is it my dress? What are they saying about me? What are they thinking about me? Do I look okay? Is it my hair? Did I do something funny or unusual? And she begins to create all of these scenarios inside of her head to the point that her body begins to physically react. And then it triggers fight or flight, and she starts feeling like, I need to get out of here. This is crazy. Why do people always make fun of me? I don't deserve this. And then the conversation inside her mind begins to turn back to self-hate. And she starts thinking again, down another rabbit hole, nobody likes me, I'm hopeless, I hate myself, why can I never do things right? Why can I never figure this out? Sound familiar? One day, she walked into work and her manager didn't greet her as they normally would. And so that began to wander in her head, and she began to get upset about that situation, which would cause this internal dialogue of, what if I get fired? How am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to do? They'll take my car. How am I going to pay for my kids' school? I can't do anything right. Why am I never good enough? These are all things that all of us say internally to ourselves. You might not realize it, but you spend more time every single day talking to yourself than you do any other person that you will encounter. So really stop and think about, what is the conversation inside that you are having with yourself? Because I assure you, if your conversation sounds anything like Rachel, you need to learn the real world proven skills that will stop this insanity in your head. Because you are killing yourself and you don't even realize it. And that's the part that frustrates me so much, is because you don't have to live this way. You do not have to spend over 20 years like I did suffering because I didn't understand how to process information the right way. I spent 20 years of my life like that, and it brought me to the brink of suicide. So please do not just sit there and continue to live how you are in this stressful situation. If you could really adjust the way that you are thinking, you wouldn't endure the decades of stress like Rachel, like myself, and maybe even like you. Remember that you can manage and even overcome your anxiety by learning to feel better with introspection. But you need expert guidance to teach you how to do that. Ask yourself as many questions about your anxiety as you can, and write those answers down. You know, you'll learn a lot. Persist, because deep down, you have and you know the answers to all of the questions. It's already inside you. All I do is remind powerful people how powerful they truly are. Observe your relationship with your feelings, your thoughts, and your body's responses to them, and track them and talk to yourself to a better, calmer, and more panic-free state of mind. Watch my free webinar if you want to learn how to do that. Go to stephendiamond.com and click on the link that will teach you how to stop your panic attacks. The number one reason people fail in life is a resistance to change and to try new things, because you are afraid. And fear is what paralyzes us and prevents us from taking any action whatsoever. I see it every single day. Being watchful and precautious and reflective while taking your time to do important things might have their advantages, but if your habit is inching more towards procrastination, then it could be that you are resistant to change. I know almost every person that comes to my program feels this way. And frankly speaking, you're not alone. There are millions of people all over the world who feel this way, who are living this way. I call them Zombie Nation because they go through their lives thinking this is normal, and it's not. Most people in some way or another are resistant to change because the level of uncertainty it brings with it. So learn to question yourself often and ask yourself why you feel a certain way, because your answers are really going to help you. And recognizing any resistance to change is the first step to removing it and moving forward in your life. If you don't learn how to remove the resistance in your life, you are doomed to stay exactly where you are. So some, I find, get so lost and stuck in their cycle of anxiety that they fail to recognize the scope for change, which will lead them to a better life. While most of these thoughts are indeed assumptions, they can become the very beliefs that stand in your way of what you want to achieve. So unless you learn how to remove these blocks from your mind, you're going to stay compartmentalized into the little box that you've built for yourself. It's really like that. You know, by honestly examining your belief system that stops you from acting on a change over time, you will learn a lot about why your life isn't where you wanted it to be by now. And identifying your negative belief system is the key to moving forward. It's for this reason, the very first thing that I do when a new coaching client comes on board is we do what I like to call an internal evaluation. And I'll explain to you what that is. I always like to start with the end in mind. In other words, I like to know where it is we want to end up before we actually begin the process. And together, you and I will define with clarity and absolute clarity the results that you are committed to achieving in your own life, and we will begin to use those answers to set some realistic and achievable goals before we ever begin. An example of a negative belief system can be things like believing some or all of these things. Have you ever felt this way? Things like, I'm not going to change, I know that, because I know myself. Have you ever thought that? That is a limiting belief system. It's a negative belief system. Have you ever thought, I'm not as good as others, surely I can't compete with them? That too is holding you back. What about, I don't want to ask for help, it will make me seem weak, and therefore everyone will know that I'm not as strong as I pretend to be. Now, that's a red flag. How about, here's another one I hear a lot. I don't think anyone cares. No one's going to help me. You invalidate yourself because you don't think you're worthy. Another one that I hear is, I messed up when I could have made things better, so it's too late now. That was my only chance, so I just gave up. What chance are you giving yourself if you think like that? Another one I hear is, I've been misunderstood and mistreated all my life, so I just accept it. No one changed for me, so why should I change my life for someone else? Can you see how this is corrosive and toxic? I hear these things every single day. A lot of people say to me, my life is so unfair. I just suck it up. People will mock me. They already know. I know it. And I just want to go hide. I don't want to be around people. Does any of this resonate with you? There is no point to having an internal dialogue like this. It is corrosive and toxic, and it's only going to make things more difficult, worse, and you're going to continue to suffer, and you might suffer even more than you're suffering right now. If any of this resonates with you, you are in danger of some serious consequences if you don't learn the skills to change your life. The more checks and balances that you have, meaning the more skills that you learn, the more you are less resistant to change. And over time, that completely fades away because you create new neural net pathways in your brain and you give your brain new options. So, in other words, the fear goes away. And that's a really good place to be in your life. You can change right now. You can try to do the same things that you've been doing and fail again and again and again. Or you can try something that you've never tried and get a new and better result that puts you back in control of your own life. Keep at it, because the harder you try, the more you persist, the more likely you're going to become the change that you desire. And that's a beautiful thing to witness. I see it all the time with my coaching clients. Hey, there's so much more that I really want to teach you, and I will over the coming weeks and months as I continue to do these weekly classes. So stay tuned. But I'm out of time for today. Until we meet again, I hope that you'll be good to yourself, and I hope that you will take care of yourself and each other. And I'll see you on the inside of my program. Thanks for watching.